Welcome, everybody. My name is Devin Lau. I am Associate Director for Yale Center Beijing, and we host a number of programs throughout the year, both in person in Beijing as well as online via Zoom as well as live stream. And we're very excited to continue to bring the most relevant topics and shed some light onto current events, history, as well as politics and science and economics and all of these topics. And I think today's topic will be a way to sort of bring a lot of those things together. Our speaker today is Abbas Amanat, who is the William Graham Sumner Professor Emeritus of History at Yale. He received his bachelor's from Tehran University and his doctor of philosophy from the School of Oriental Studies at the University of Oxford. Shortly after which he began teaching at Yale, starting in 1983, and he taught at Yale until 2021. He's written about the history of Iran, both early modern and modern, and earlier, as well as just generally the Middle East, the Muslim world, the Persianate world, and of course his wonderful giant book, Iran, A Modern History. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's also available in Chinese, actually. It's translated into Chinese as well as into a few other languages and is going to be translated into Japanese soon as well. So if you're interested in today's topic, that's also another great resource to look at. Again, Iran, A Modern History is available in Chinese. And today we're very excited to have him here to share with us a little bit. Of course, Iran is very much in the current events, but as Professor Amanat and I were just discussing, there's always actually been a long history of the civilizations between Iran and China. And so very much eager to hear what he has to share. We're going to let him take the floor, after which we'll have a little bit of time for some questions and answers as well. And so without further ado, I am Professor Amanat.
Yes, Dr. Liu, thank you very much for inviting me. This is a quite a remarkable occasion since most of the time my invitations are for gatherings or Zoom meetings, either in the United States or in the Western Hemisphere. So having a chance to talk to an audience on the other side of the globe, which, as you pointed out, I wish I would have had a chance to talk more about the civilizational, historical ties between Iran and China that goes back really to at least 5th century BC or thereabout, if not earlier. And much of the common threads that we can find in the history of both China and Iran, even in modern times, not necessarily related to each other, but very parallel resemblances that you can find in the process of modernization, how these countries try to change from their traditional settings into contemporary settings, how far they were successful, what revolutions they experienced. As a matter of fact, I think China and Iran are among very few countries in the world that in the course of the 20th century experienced two revolutions. That's the Constitutional Revolution around the beginning of the century. I think China was 1912, if I'm not wrong. Iran was 1906 to 1911, or later, really. And then, of course, the 47 revolution in mainland China, and the Islamic Revolution of 1979 in Iran. But these are, as a matter of fact, not the most pleasant side of the encounter between the two civilizations. The most important, as you might know, is the Silk Roads, or these days you have to say Silk Roads, since there is not one road. But the connections between the two commercially, financially, I wouldn't say financially, commercially, diplomatically, and civilizationally, in terms of the number of commodities that were exchanged between China and Iran, is quite remarkable. When you look into its detail, you would see that there is so much to be said. That being said, I think, for better or for worse, our focus today is going to be on contemporary Iran, not even about my book, which more or less ends around 2010 or thereabouts, where I thought for a book of 1,000 pages, I need not to go any further. But today's contemporary Iran is quite a remarkable course of events between, I would say, June of 2025 and the today's a year later. And it displays an extraordinary complexity in this situation. And I'm going to actually go through some of the most significant aspects of this very complex situation. For one thing, since June of last year, when the Israelis and then eventually the Americans get engaged in invading Iran, there's no other terms for it. No matter how much the media or the politicians in this country try to modify that and use other terms, this is nothing short of an invasion. Despite these two rounds of very severe bombardment of Iran and the loss of its leadership, irrespective of their quality, that regime stood in their place, and even if anything, has gotten stronger than even it was about a year ago, which says something about the failure of the very idea that by invading Iran, the Islamic Republic is going to collapse. That was the chief fundamental motivation behind Israelis who initiated the whole thing, and the United States that somewhat foolishly followed that course. And up to today, to everybody's surprise, not only the Americans, not only the Israelis, not only the Iranian hopeful but rather naive opposition outside Iran and inside Iran, that they were hoping that foreign invasion would bring the regime down. And despite the loss of quite a remarkable number of political and military leaders who were eliminated in the process purposefully by the Israelis and by the Americans, mostly by Israelis, including Khamenei himself, despite all the crimes that they have committed over the decades. Their loss did not equate the loss of the Islamic Republic, the collapse of the Islamic Republic. So the question is why and how this had happened. One fact is that the surprise is coming from the fact that there is this misperception that a military option, and particularly the aerial bombardment of a country, and of all the countries, a country like Iran, which has stood in its place, like China, for instance, for thousands of years. It's on the map. It's always been on the map. You cannot simply, and the country of 90 odd million people, and vast, probably the 17th in its landmass and its population in the world, you cannot just simply obliterate it from the map or change its regime. And of all, by a country like Israel, that its very legitimacy in many respects is questionable, and above all in its treatment of its own people, Palestinian people, I think the entire premises that you would be able to bring a regime down to everybody's great surprise proved to be wrong. It became more evident than ever that then the Netanyahu regime in Israel basically sold the Americans a phony image that they're going to change the situation in Iran and the Middle East. Of course, they are what I would say addicts to violence, as it became evident in the Gaza case, with close to 100,000 people being killed by the Israelis. As it's happening today in front of our eyes every day in southern Lebanon, which has been turned into complete ruins. And eventually, I think the Israeli plan is to annex it, as they did in the case of Israel, as they did in the West Bank. And as such, I think we are facing a very kind of a severe circumstances. On the other hand, there is an equally depressing situation. And that is that the Islamic Republic, particularly since December of 2025 and the January, particularly during January, has committed enormous crimes domestically by basically gunning down at least 10,000 of the street protesters, most of them from the middle class, some of my friends who were either badly injured or died, killed in the course of the demonstration. At least 10,000 were gunned down by the Islamic Republic, particularly by the Revolutionary Guards, in the course of 2 days or 2.5 days of suppressing or basically coup that out of fear that the protesters are going to get the upper hand, to gain the upper hand. So it's better to suppress it right there and there. In an act of brutality that even within the 47 years of the Islamic Republic was unheard of. The scale of it was something that is not comparable to the movement of the women freedom in 3 years ago, or to 2009 Green movement. None of them, in terms of the casualties, were as large as what we noticed in the January of 2026. So that complicates even the situation further. That is, you have a regime that domestically is quite capable and willing to gun down, to suppress, to massacre its own population, its own very precious population, namely mostly young, well-educated Iranians, male and female, who basically are fighting for their own civil rights, for the greater freedom in the country, and for the removal of the social, religious restrictions that the regime has placed on the Iranians for the past 47 years. And that resulted in, as I just pointed out, in a number of protest movements ever since the start of the revolution in 1979, but more intensively from 2009 onwards. There's at least 4, possibly 5 popular uprisings that were suppressed, and the last one more severely than the others. Okay, so what does that tell us? That tells us that the regime it stands in a position, particularly when I talk about the regime, of course, we are not talking about a unanimous body, but we are talking about some pockets here and there with different kind of interests. The Revolutionary Guards are, of course, different from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Both of them are different from probably the Iranian parliament or whatever is left of the Iranian parliament. And other institutions that either are these days fairly quiet, keep a low profile, or they probably no longer are as active as they used to be. These are the institutions that the Islamic Republic has created over the past half a century, 47 years. What also is visible, that's the third factor, is that, as I just hinted at a moment ago, there is this body of opposition to the Islamic Republic, particularly outside Iran, in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, or wherever there is a concentration of Iranians who emigrated to the West over the past course of 30 years or more. That some of them, or at least a substantial body of it, are royalists. These are the people who would like to see the return of Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah, who has a claim over the throne, the Pahlavi throne. But even he recognizes the fact that the chances are very, very slim. But he would present himself as a kind of a mediator for return to democracy. This is at least part of the rhetoric. In reality, whatever course of action he had taken over the past few years seemed to me totally misplaced. He had become very close both to the Israelis and to the Americans, the two forces that invaded Iran. And the Iranians don't take that very lightly. So that was a huge mistake. The other mistake of his, among many, is that he failed to create a kind of a coalition of oppositional forces. So he's pretty much relying on a bunch of riffraffs. I have no other better word for it. Or naive Iranians abroad who have a very, very basic or none at all political insight and understanding. So they follow him kind of foolishly. Then they think that if the Islamic Republic collapses, which by itself is a huge question, there is going to be, next day, there's going to be a paradise. There's a Western model of democracy, whatever is the worth of it, is going to prevail over Iran, and Iran is going to change course there and then. That seemed to have also come to a deadlock, or if not failure, complete failure. That image, that vision, namely that because of the past, ever since the of June of last year, there were all these high hopes that tomorrow this regime is going to collapse, which it didn't. Then the uprising inside Iran, the street protest. It was not really an uprising. It was a street protest. The street protest was suppressed, and the opposition abroad, the royalists mostly, claimed that this is the prelude to the forthcoming revolution against the Islamic Republic and the collapse of the Islamic Republic. That didn't happen. And then, of course, the war of the past 3 months, since April of this year, the invasion by the United States and Israel, which resulted in the execution, killing of Mr. Khamenei, again, and quite a large number of military and some political supporters or politicians or leading people in the Islamic Republic. Despite that, the regime is in its place. If anything, and I would like to underscore that point, these revolutionary guards and the most radical elements within the Iranian regime now have taken the upper hand. Particularly the successful control over the Strait of Hormuz, which was part of the Islamic Republic's strategy for quite a long time. If you read some of their literature, you would see that they had, for a very long time, insisted on the fact that this is going to be a core issue in terms of any international confrontation with the Western world, with the United States. And remember, they have had, this is part of their ideological position ever since the revolution of 1979. Death to America. America as the great Satan. Israel as the great collaborator, that they never actually use the term Israel. They always say occupied Zionists, occupying Zionists. So whatever it is, for them, it is in a certain respect the fulfillment of their prophecies. That's what they had said for 47 years, that the United States is the great Satan. Now they can point at the invasion and say, here it is. That's what we were telling you. And of course, they learned a great deal over the 47 years, particularly from the left. They learned a great deal about how to behave with the Western, originated anti-Western rhetoric, that most of it came from the left and was adopted by the Islamic Republic, including from the, if I may say, just in a parenthesis, by the Iranian Maoists of the 1970s and 80s. They were quite a force to generate that kind of anti-Westernism, anti-Americanism, that by itself roots in places, in episodes in Chinese history that I need not to go to. Well, so the option of Reza Pahlavi seemed to me it's nearly over, if it's not entirely over. Namely, that it seems to be it seems to have been discredited to the extent that whatever was the chances, which were very slim anyway, now even Trump, which himself is incoherent and totally irrational, does not seem to pay any more homage or attention to the option of Reza Pahlavi. So what's going on there? We are in a kind of standstill, at least as of yesterday, and then there's an exchange of hostilities on both sides. Iranians mostly either very symbolic when they invade Israel, or the Israelis when they were effectively destroy even more of Iranian infrastructure. And of course, same with the United States. Every day you see of a new incident. And then there is this semblance and appearance of some kind of apparently a ceasefire, which I think is very questionable, but that's what it is. And I don't know whether and in what terms there is going to be a settlement, or whether there's going to be any kind of a sustainable peace For one reason, because the Israelis are going to sabotage it, as they did at least 3 times. So they maybe wouldn't be very happy, no matter how much Trump these days apparently huffs and puffs that he has been very straightforward with Netanyahu and his cohorts in Israel. We don't know if there is a difference, if there is a rift between Israel and Iran. But whatever it is, we should not expect that peace and quiet would emerge without the Israelis at least getting something out of it. And I don't know how. And I don't know how. I think the key point here is the Hezbollah in Lebanon. To everybody's surprise, even myself, Iranians are insisting on the fact that the Hezbollah should be protected and there's not going to be any more Israeli crazy attack in southern Lebanon and killing of ordinary people in the name of the of trying to suppress or destroy the Hezbollah. It seems that the future of Hezbollah is somewhat tied to the future of the peace talks in Iran. And this is not good for Iran. This is not strategically good for Iran. But the Iranian regime, particularly the Revolutionary Guards, have very, very close ties with the Hezbollah, and I don't think they're going to abandon them. So that's going to be a major obstacle on the way. Whether the American administration can convince the Israelis to stop attacking Hezbollah and accept the presence of Hezbollah. After what? After more than 2 years of brutal destruction of southern Lebanon, of parts of Beirut, still the Hezbollah is in place. Everybody thought that they disappeared for good, but that didn't happen with the Hezbollah. It didn't happen with the Hamas in the Gaza, and if not in with the Iranians are probably now, and this is not an exaggeration, the Revolutionary Guards and the radicals are stronger than ever they have been in Iran. And they're going to remain so for the time being. I don't think there is any chance for their weakening in short term. In long term, yes. I think their ideological positions may change. This kind of rhetoric of Islam has been tired and, probably is going to take more of a nationalistic turn. Maybe something is going generationally to happen. And if you want to be optimistic, Iran may move in a different direction. But for the time being, we don't know. Then what would happen, I think this is the last point I would like to make, is that who are these people that we refer to as the Iranians that negotiate with the United States, presumably talk with the intermediaries, the Pakistanis, the Turks, possibly even the Chinese, which I think are going to play a very important part. Who are they? We don't know. There's a big question mark there. We just see some figureheads and that they're engaged in Mr. Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the Parliament. Who knows why? He's the one who is in the spearhead of the negotiations. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abbas, maybe a few others, we don't know. So the nature of this new formation particularly after the collapse, after the assassination of Ali Khamenei, and a fair number of, quite a substantial number of the top rank revolutionary by the Israelis, of the revolutionary leaders, I mean, Revolutionary Guard commanders. So, who are the people who are now in power? We don't know. A few names here and there we hear, but I doubt that, first of all, a struggle for power is not going on. Probably there is one that we don't see and that we don't, it's not in the open, or at least not yet in the open. And the fate of most, in certain respect, enigmatic and at the same time kind of ridiculous is this new guy Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Ali Khamenei, who supposedly is the new guardian jurist or the new supreme leader. Nobody has ever seen him. Nobody has ever heard of him. This guy is completely non-existent. I think probably is either dead or very badly incapacitated. So what we have a person, a leadership in absentia. And what's going to happen to that? There is a precedence for that in Islamic history. I've given a talk actually a couple of weeks ago on Sciences Po in Paris about the possibility that that 10th century model of the hidden imam, the 12th imam who's been considered as the hidden imam, who's going to appear at the end of the time, is a model that may either by choice or out of desperation may be adopted by the Islamic Republic or is already adopted by the Islamic Republic. We hear every now and then there is a declaration coming out in writing that this is probably from the new supreme leader. And there are all kinds of images, as you can see in many of the demonstrations, which incidentally the numbers are very small. It's not more than 5,000 or something. That shows how how the popular support for the regime is dwindling, even more than before. But nevertheless, you see all of this propaganda, all of these huge murals that you can see around Tehran or in other cities, showing the Revolutionary Guards the holding the Strait of Hormuz, or the picture of Khomeini, Ali Khamenei, and his son Mujtaba as a kind of continuity in leadership, that kind of thing. But this is all propaganda. So we don't know what's going on. And the future of the regime in terms of leadership may be one of the weak points, weak links in the future of the Islamic Republic. And the struggle for power there, what comes out of it, we don't know. I'm sure that the Revolutionary Guards who are currently in charge of the Hormuz and the whole of the Persian Gulf region may play an important part in the future of the Islamic Republic. Who are they? They're faceless. We don't know. Then I think also in terms of negotiations, no peace, no war may continue for quite a while. And that for domestic reasons in the United States. That is that because there is a midterm election in the United States in November of this year, Trump administration are extremely worried because of the fact that in every possible ground they have made a mess out of everything. So there is no point of success except for the financial markets, the value of the stocks. Otherwise, in every other ground that you look at it, there is a loss in terms of the social, uh, their attempt to try to bring about social changes. They seem to have been very unpopular. War in the United States with Iran is extremely unpopular. Support for Israel is badly dwindling within the United States. And of course, the propped up fear of China that we hear now and then, as if uh, certain part of the American politics or polity is desperate to find an enemy, and the enemy is could not be Russia, could not be Iran. Well, they are in certain hierarchy, but at the top of that hierarchy is China. And the Chinese, I mean, I'm speculating, I'm not an expert on Chinese politics at all, but it seems to me that they don't seem to have much of an incentive to to be a problem solver for the United States at this particular context. So they probably let the Americans and the Israelis to boil in their own juices rather than coming up with a kind of a plan for rescuing the negotiations, whatever that negotiation, whatever the stage that negotiation is, whatever the demands of the United States, whatever the demands of the Islamic Republic, whatever it is, it seems to me that probably the Chinese, being very pragmatic, may look around and see that there is no reason for them to try to resolve the issue, except the fact that they purchase, I think, up to 90% of the Iranian oil production. But they have very secure reserves, we've been told. That's the Chinese, have very secure reserves. And they may have alternative options for providing the necessary energy oil that they require, at least for the short term. And for the middle term and the long term, it remains to be seen. So, given all of this, probably in all their own wisdom and in all their own cautious course of policy, they may stay away and see what's going to happen in the Strait of Hormuz. Whether the Strait of Hormuz is going to open, eventually it will. But in whose benefit remains to be seen.
Great, thank you so much. And I think we can open the floor for some questions from the audience. I think we've covered a lot of ground, but I'm sure there's plenty that people would like to ask. So if anybody has questions, feel free to raise your hands, or you can also unmute yourself, and we can call on you and we can have some interaction.
Well, I've talked for three quarter of an hour, it seems to me. So uh, I think, by the way, this may be, I'm not quite sure, this may be the kind of the skeleton for what may appear as an article somewhere, maybe in Foreign Affairs or somewhere. There are lots of speculations, lots of talks, so I have something new to say. I have to have something new to say, and I think probably I do, because the combination of all these four factors together may offer us a a very complex view, very enigmatic situation, but it is better than what some so-called experts, overnight experts, tend to speculate.
Yes. Looks like Alicia has her hand up. Alicia, do you have a question you want to ask?
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay, go
Um,
ahead.
Go ahead.
so I'm a high school student who is really interested in history, and our school mostly focuses on the European, like Western side of history. And when I'm learning the history of maybe like Second World War or First World War, there is a kind of connection between those war history and the history, like and what we experience today. So the question I have is, throughout a 500-year history, Iran has experienced a lot of foreign intervention and um, internal power shifts, as you mentioned. And so, how does like the current U.S.-Iran confrontation resemble the past experiences,
Mhm.
such as the one during the Persian Empire or periods of other like foreign interference in modern Iran? And how do these historical experiences influence Iran's diplomatic strategies today?
It's an excellent question.
Thank you.
Uh, um, well, that's the kind of thing that the historians would love to talk about,
Mhm.
namely that do a certain comparison with the past. Quite frankly, over the past few months, I've been thinking whether I can find something very basic, whether I can find an equivalent to what is happening up to today. God knows what's going to happen in 2 months' time or a week time. We don't know. But up to today, if we would consider the course of action that the Islamic Republic had taken and with the Revolutionary Guards at its forefront, whether this has been a success, whether the war seemed to have turned into a victory for Iran, or victory is it's too much to say, but has not been defeated, has not been eliminated. That for sure. Okay. If you look at a case like that one, that whether this can be interpreted as a victory has not happened to Iran since the 18th century, since the time of Nadir Shah, that is mid 18th century, 1730s, after the collapse of the Safavid Empire, and he's emerging as a kind of a savior, at least for a period of time, as a savior before he turned into a real tyrant. During this period, 1730s, 1740s, he restored Iran back the into the time of the Safavid era, and he was quite popular. He fought against the Peter the Great in the north and defeated it because already the Russians has advanced into the southern Caspian, Iranian coast. He fought against the Ottomans, probably still in the 18th century, one of the most powerful military forces in the world, if not the most important, but one of the most important, and defeated them and forced them backward, and recaptured Iranian territories from them. He, even in the Persian Gulf, managed to make quite a few advances. He ran the Afghans and Uzbeks out of the eastern Iranian frontiers. So he was for a while in the 1730s and 40s a kind of a symbol of success. He had world attention. If you look at some of the newspapers of the 18th century, you would see that Nadir Shah or Nadir Khan or Nadir Qoli, as his real name was, as a chief that has revived Iran, emerges as a uh, major world figure. And as has been said later on, because of his invasion of the Mughal Empire of India and taking over Delhi, he had a kind of a greater notoriety. And it has been said, and probably it can be said with some proof, that later on the early 19th century East India Company's expansion to central and southern India. The possibly the same time General Bonaparte's interest in the recapture of the southern Indian provinces all comes from the fact that they saw that the Mughal Empire could easily be defeated as it was defeated by Nadir, by this Iranian conqueror. So that's the only example I can see for the whole of the 18th century or middle of the 18th century to the first quarter of the 21st century. There is nothing else. Most of the engagements that Iran had, to which some of this you refer to, First World War, Second World War, both of them, Iran was basically a bystander victim, that it did not have any part, it did not it did not enter into any kind of a coalition with the Axis during the First World War, Second World War, on the side of the Germans, or with the Allied forces during the Second World War. In both cases, Iran was almost completely occupied by foreign forces. First World War by the British and the Russian, Tsarist Russian, up to 1917, and then by the British throughout the rest of the war and post-war period. That's the First World War. And during the Second World War, of course, by Russians, that is by the Soviets, by the British and by the Americans during the course of the war. It was more of an occupation. They did not really attack Iran. They did attack Iran, but quickly Iranians surrendered. So the example even of the more recent war, Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s, you see the war of 8 years eventually ended in a standstill. That was interpreted because Iran lost territory in its western borders in favor of Saddam's Iraq. But that quickly changed after Saddam attacked Kuwait and later on engaged with the United States, or the United States engaged with Saddam, and Saddam was destroyed. So Iranians managed to regain some of the frontier territories that they lost in the West, over the Zagros frontier. So that cannot be really interpreted as a success in the war. They fought a very, very valiant, very persistent resistance against the Iraqis at a great price. That close to 1 million of Iranians were killed, 800,000 to 1 million are the casualties of the Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s. And much that it had impacted the creation of the Islamic Republic in the decades afterwards. Creation, I mean the development of the Islamic Republic. Much of those who fought in the war are the current leaders, or were up to recently the leaders of the Islamic Republic. Now, that all being said, I cannot see any other example of success. Most of the time, it was a history of resistance and history of defeat, but not destruction, that you can see ever since 17th century, during the reign of Abbas the Great, which is the height of the Safavid Empire and the success of the Safavids against the Ottomans, against the Uzbeks, against the Portuguese in the Persian Gulf. I mean, the same place that now it's being fought, the Strait of Hormuz, once conquered in 1622, 1623. I'm not quite sure about the exact date. When the Iranian forces, with the help of the East India Company, British East India Company, fought and expelled the Portuguese from the island of Hormuz when they had their strongholds, and the Strait of Hormuz was gained by Iran, regained by Iran, that is, because prior to that it was Iranian territory. Ever since the ancient times, it was always been Iranian territory. By the way, the name of it, Hormuz, is Ahura Mazda, is the term, is the god of Zoroastrianism, the wise god of Zoroastrianism, that it's the name of this strait, because of the local dynasties that were Hormozids known in the area. Anyway, what is important is to remember that Iranians have a legitimate claim over the Strait of Hormuz. But whether this claim was ever enforced prior to the recent hostilities remains to be seen. I think the example that we can go back is the time of Abbas the Great, as I just mentioned, in the 17th century. But one final point in response to you. I mean, when you read the history of modern China prior to 47, the parallels with modern Iran and the process of modernization, the problem we encounter with the great powers, and this is it's not exactly the same, but the parallels are very striking between China and Iran. If somebody reads, I'm sure some of you have read, I had a very prominent colleague in the history department for decades, Professor Jonathan Spence, who is late Professor Jonathan Spence, who has written this famous book. I think it's called In Search of Modern China. It's a thick, famous textbook. It still is the most probably well-known textbook. And many chapters of it, when you draw a comparison with modern Iran, you would see that there are very remarkable comparisons. The same of resistance, the same of cultural confidence, the sense of sometimes weakening resolve against the great powers. These similarities are very striking.
Thank you
For
for
those
that.
of you who are interested in comparative history, yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say that's we're actually having a Jonathan Spence memorial lecture series coming up for
Oh,
those
really?
of you.
That's yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so for
He
those
was
of
a
you that are
great,
interested, yeah.
yeah. He's a great colleague, and always have been extraordinary encouragement for me, because my first book, Resurrection and Renewal, about the messianic movement in the middle of the 19th century, very famous, very forceful one, corresponds very closely to the, I think it's Taiping
Mhm.
movement in China at the same time with the same messianic motives. So he and I exchanged notes on that quite a lot. And he read, prior to, mine came out much earlier than his. And he told me that he was very excited when he saw that there are comparisons between the two of them. Of course, the typing movement was far, in terms of the sheer numbers and the intensity of the uprising against the central Chinese government, compared to the Babi movement in Iran in the 19th century, which was, by the way, equally troubling. But the population of Iran in the mid 19th century was something like 6 million, if that. Population of China in the mid 19th century was, I don't know, huge. If they lost what, more than a couple of millions in the course of the Taiping uprisings, and the uprising in the Taiping had the chance to actually prevail in the hostilities with the central Chinese government. But that's the fate of the messianic movement.
Um, Speaking of sort of messianic movement and the power of sort of this religion and politics kind of coming together. This is a question from the live stream audience, which we also have over 900 people joining us on live stream. But the question of the Shiite faith or philosophy or prophecy, eschatology, all of these things, how do they play into the current sort of popular sentiment within Iran and how those views um, affect how it views itself as well as sort of its place in the rest of the Middle East and the rest of the world?
Again, an excellent question, which I actually did have a note here, but I didn't get into it. I just look at it right now. Look, it is quite possible to say that the revolution of 1979 can be looked at as, among other aspects of it, can be looked at as a kind of an proto-apocalyptic, proto-messianic, or even not proto, a kind of messianic movement that anticipates some kind of a apocalypse, not apocalypse in the sense of the annihilation of the world, but apocalypse in the sense of substantial revolutionary change in the course of the world, if not world, at least Islamic world. You can see that in Khomeini, no doubt. I've written about it. It appears also in my book. I've written several articles about it. And at least two books. One, Apocalyptic Islam and the Iranian Revolution, which came out 2009, I believe. And then the other collection of essays that I put together with a former student of mine called Imagining the End, that came out as a book. And it's a collection of probably around 20 or so essays that were produced around the year 2000. And they all engage in the issue of apocalypticism, both historically and in modern sense, in contemporary sense. Now, as far as today is concerned, it is, we've been told that this ideology still persists. Maybe it's still lingering. Maybe among the Revolutionary Guards who are sitting on the Strait of Hormuz, and I mean, between life and death, the future for them is to persist and to stay there. For them, maybe there is a kind of a vision of the hidden imam is going to really as extreme as that the hidden imam may eventually emerge. And you know, Khomeini was a hidden imam. I mean, he is the kind of a messianic figure more than anything else. He was not a, well, he was a very crafty politician, but he was at the same time, I think, more of a messianic figure. So, but nevertheless, the spirit of messianism had survived. I've discussed that at some length in that book, Apocalyptic Islam and Iranian Shiism. At least in a couple of chapters I've mentioned, and also in modern Iran, I've also discussed it. For those of you who would like to read it in Chinese, of course, the Chinese edition. I don't have a knowledge of Chinese, but I hear that it's a good translation. So that's a possibility that we may see that it's reviving again in today's Iran. Maybe it's a motivating force behind the Revolutionary Guard Corps, maybe, but we don't have that kind of a first-hand. Even we don't see an interview with a military leader who has his hands on, not somebody who is sitting in Tehran, but somebody who is actually sitting in the Persian Gulf somewhere and sustaining the bombardments and in certain respects probably take the initiative Those people we don't know about, and we don't know where they stand. Maybe that they have some kind of it's still the remnant of that ideology of the Islamic Republic. That's why that Islam is beyond Iran, and that's why the proxies are important, or have been important for the time being. And I think unfortunately, this is the weak point for the Islamic Republic. I've always been against, in the past, the precedence for the case of the proxies in Iran has always been disastrous. Ever since 7th century, you can bring examples of the collapse of the Sasanian Empire, which was at the time probably the most powerful empire in the world, well, China aside, but certainly more powerful than Byzantine Empire. I mean, the support or the lack of support, the wrong policy towards the proxies brought its end, Safavid times at the same time. And the Islamic Republic's own example, if you look at the case of the disaster that happened in Syria, after billions of the Iranian money, after so much of its resources, revolutionary guards, weapons, finances, all of this was devoted to keeping the Ba'athist regime in Syria in power, who was not, by the way, always very loyal to Iran. Eventually, that collapsed, and the Iranians doesn't seem to be learning their lessons. So they still, as I just said earlier on, they're supporting the Hezbollah, and I don't know the situation in Hezbollah when the majority of the Lebanese people are against it. What does it say to them? That this is a side of Iranian imperialism? What is it? Why they are insisting on supporting of the Hezbollah? And Hezbollah is even secondary to the Palestinian issue. Hezbollah is basically a nagging on the side of the Israelis that we have a force. That's why the Iranians are keeping them there. They want to make sure that there is something there to bother Israelis.
And can you sort of shed a little more insight into historically this antagonism? How does Israel fit into this, and by proxy the U.S.? Why is the U.S. and so so obsessed
Well,
with Israel? And
well, that's. After all, the Islamic Republic for 47 years says death to the United States, death to Israel. The United States is a great Satan, and so forth. All of this, we hear all of this. And eventually, that kind of a rhetoric creates some reality. That's my theory. That rhetorics are important. Rhetorics are dangerous because eventually they may materialize in some unpleasant realities. And this is exactly the case that it's happened in Iran. I mean, after all these years that they said death to America, eventually a regime emerged in the United States who is irrational enough to take this seriously and try to eliminate, despite the fact that it's one of those wars that nobody seemed to be own it. So nobody wants to claim it, but it's just a kind of an accidental war. They call it a war of choice because they want to give it a kind of a more respectable name, but it's actually an accidental war. Basically, Trump, in a moment of irrationality that it's plenty in his career, and gets worse by day, um, decided that you can bring this American armada to the Persian Gulf and attack Iran, and Iran is going to collapse overnight, and proved to be completely wrong. So that's what I say. there was very difficult actually, even for the specialists, very difficult to figure out why the Islamic Republic, what are the actual foundations of its strength. Those that claim that, it's all Ali Khamenei, just eliminate him and the Islamic Republic collapse. They proved to be wrong. Now, as far as your point is concerned, I don't think that they are going to abandon, particularly the Hezbollah. They may have abandoned their equivalent Hashd Sha'bi in Lebanon, in Iraq. No, we don't know how much they're supporting the Hashd Sha'bi. These are all behind the screen, behind the curtain. We don't know what's going on there. And we hear that there is very close ties with the Hezbollah. There are much marriages even between the members of the Revolutionary Guards in Iran and Hezbollah. So this goes beyond, this was kind of a family ties perhaps. So they cannot easily give it up. And they insist on it because they would think that the United States is not in a position to engage in a war or continuation of a war. Whether they're right or wrong, I don't know. Maybe they're wrong. And it reaches a stage that if they're going to play too much into this game, they may be the losers, not the winners. But they seem to use this as an option. I mean, as far as yesterday or the day before yesterday, and the exchange of the hostilities with the Israelis, it seems to me they did it because they think that there is some benefit in the course of their later on negotiations with the United States, because they want to bring the Hezbollah. They don't want Hezbollah to disappear completely, because they lose some kind of a force closer to Israel in their favor, and they want to keep that as a thorn on the side of the Israelis.
So I guess we can end with this last question, which is there a way out? What uh,
Well, well, historians can be rather pessimistic, um, and they don't see a very easy way out. I don't see a very easy way out. I would like to wake up in the morning and see that there is some kind of a accord has emerged between the United States. There are certain moves in that direction. The fact that now the American administration is critical of Israel and realizes, as I just pointed out, that what they were sold by, let us, the entire enterprise, let us remove the Islamic Republic from the face of the earth, didn't pay off. You cannot just bomb a country, and a country like Iran. Iran is a very vulnerable country. There is no doubt about it, because the resources are limited. Iran is vulnerable. But who suffers? People of Iran, who encounter huge inflation, who encounter all the outcome of the war. 1,700 people, up by the government of Iran's own statistics, of the civilians were killed in the course of the hostilities since April. So it's the Iranians are paying off, and they can. I hear reports from Tehran. I hear reports from Iran that people go. There's a special kind of a flatbread in Iran, which is the staple of the Iranians. It's called sangak. It's very actually tasty. They go to the bakery and they cannot purchase a whole bread. They purchase half the bread because the prices are so high that they cannot afford it. This is unbelievable in the circumstances in a country like Iran, which was relatively well-to-do, even under the Islamic Republic, was, although it was impoverished, now 41 million out of 92 million population, that's 50% of the population of Iran, are under the poverty line. Under poverty line in today's Iran means that you cannot bring food to the table for your own family of 4 or 5. Families are small or became small. So who is paying are the Iranian people. But the Islamic Republic, it seems to me, the revolutionary forces and their other supporters don't care. They care about just protecting their own people and giving them enough to remain in their support, but they don't care about the rest of the Iranian population, towards whom are very hostile.
Well, I was hoping for a more positive note to end on, but I think I think that
Well,
is the reality of the
well,
situation that we're
well,
in.
okay. Let me tell you one positive point. I mean, I should be a little bit more positive. I think what eventually that's not so positive, but what eventually is the real enemy of the Islamic Republic are the economic situation. Whether they would be able to overcome the hyperinflation, the lack of the resources, their infrastructure being so badly damaged, and survive and bring a certain prosperity to Iran and change direction towards a greater accommodation of the rest of the world, particularly the United States, remains to be seen. Maybe a new generation of a more nationalist leadership in Iran, whenever it emerges, maybe it's in favor of that kind of a course, rather than a course of supporting the proxies and confrontation with the United States, which is completely useless for Iranians. Iranian population, just one note, Iranian population is the most secular, the most pro-Western population in the entire Middle East. There is no doubt about it. If you would ask 9 out of 10 Iranians, they are all in support of greater involvement with the rest of the world. They are highly educated. They produce some of the best technical minds, or in other fields for that matter. That what happens? They end up emigrating to the West or somewhere else in the world, and just abandoning Iran, who becomes even more impoverished. So I think if there would be a change in that course, and I can see that. I mean, I can see that gradually is moving in that direction. If by, I mean, I don't want to brag about myself, but I had an interview some 6 months ago or longer about the war after the first round of the war with the Israelis. I had a piece in which says that the future of Iran is not in engaging my hostility with the rest of the world, but stay within its own borders and try to improve the situation of the Iranians inside. That had gone viral. Hundreds of thousands of people in Instagram or Telegram are watching it. And people write to me and say, we see you here and there. So there is a ear to hear that kind of a message. So I'm hopeful that that is going to be the future of Iran, even among the more more ideologically committed revolutionary forces, revolutionary guards. Who are they? We don't know, but we hope that it's going to be a future for them. That's, I think, is a more positive note that I can put into it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all your insights and for spending your time with us. Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
then. Thank you so much. Take care.